7 years. That's how long Jacksonville waited to see Y&R Slugga Tee walk free again. 7 years of his name surviving on nothing but old footage, old verses, and the legend that refused to fade while the man behind it sat locked away. Now the wait is over. The Murder Twins era, the block that raised him, the sound that made him, all of it's about to collide with a version of Jacksonville that kept moving without him. A city where new names rose up, where rivalries shifted, where the entire drill scene rewrote itself while he watched from a cell. A coming home after 7 years isn't the same as picking up exactly where you left off. And what happens next for Y&R Slugga Tee is bigger than one video, one caption, or one moment caught on camera. This is the story of how he got taken away in the first place, what those 7 years actually look like, and what's really waiting for him now that he's finally back. Yo, what's good, fam? Let's get to it, because before we get to the return, let's talk about who Y&R Slugga Tee actually is. A lot of y'all only know the name from the headlines, not the man behind it. Tyler Simmons, known to the world as Y&R Slugga Tee, came up on the north side of Jacksonville, Florida, an area that's produced some of the most documented street rap in the entire state over the last decade. He became one of the founding faces of the Y&R Collective, that's young and ruthless, a Northside affiliated crew tied to what locals call the 6 Block Alliance. Within that crew, Slugga Tee built his identity alongside another young artist, Tyler Jackson, known as Y&R Mookie, and together the two became known across Jacksonville as the Murder Twins, a duo whose chemistry on the mic, trading bars back and forth, finishing each other's lines, documenting the same blocks from two different angles, turned them into one of the defining pairings of the city's modern drill movement. Now, in the hood, we know loyalty like that means something completely different than just a rap gimmick or a marketing pairing dreamed up by somebody in an office. These weren't two strangers paired up by a label for a marketing angle. These were two young men from the same streets, telling the same story. And that authenticity is exactly what made their sound resonate the way it did. For people who haven't been keeping up with this corner of the internet, you have to understand the scale of it. Jacksonville's drill scene developed its own identity in the late 2010s. Locals call it the KTA style, fast, percussive, aggressive cadences over hard regional production. Artists like Fulio, Youngeen Ace, Spot 'em Got 'em, and the Y&R Collective all emerged from this same ecosystem, each documenting their specific block, their specific affiliations in real time for a national audience that had never paid this much attention to Jacksonville before. Slugga Tee's early releases circulated through that same independent infrastructure, straight to YouTube, no label, no major distribution, just raw footage shot on the actual blocks being referenced, faces and locations fully visible. That's what separated his content from anything more polished. It read as documentary, not performance. Now let's slow down on his actual background for a second, fam, because this is the part that gets skipped over the most. Before any of the views, before any of the headlines, Slugga Tee was just a teenager on the north side growing up around the same conditions that shaped basically every artist who came out of that same wave. Limited resources, a tight-knit but heavily policed neighborhood, and a local music scene that had figured out how to turn a smartphone camera into a direct line to a national audience without needing a single industry connection. That's important context, because it means his entry point into rap wasn't some calculated career move with a manager and a marketing plan behind it. It was a kid documenting his own block the same way his peers were documenting theirs, building an audience one upload at a time, with the Y&R name and the 6 Block Alliance functioning less like a brand and more like an extension of the actual relationships he grew up inside of. That's the foundation everything else in this story gets built on top of. Not a manufactured persona, but a real teenager's real environment, turned into content faster than anybody around him could have predicted. But here's where it gets real. January 2019, that's the date that changed everything. The Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, under Sheriff Mike Williams, announced a sweeping operation they called Operation Wrap Up. Williams, alongside Mayor Lenny Curry and State Attorney Melissa Nelson, announced the arrest of 6 men for being convicted felons in possession of firearms. Now hold up, before y'all start thinking this was some kind of normal drug bust, it wasn't. JSO was implementing a new strategy involving social media to crack down on local felons possessing firearms, and the centerpiece of that strategy was using the rapper's own music videos as evidence. Williams stated that these videos typically glorify drug use and celebrate a culture of violence, going as far as calling gang music videos the gang graffiti of the 1980s. The real kicker though, Tyler Simmons, the man who would become Y&R Slugga Tee, was one of two juveniles arrested that day. At the time, Simmons was just 17 years old, charged specifically with possession of a weapon by a juvenile delinquent found to have committed a felony act, a separate, more complicated legal track than the adult charges his co-defendants were facing, because juvenile cases in Florida move through a different court process entirely, one that can later transfer a defendant into adult sentencing depending on the severity of what's alleged and how the case develops over time. That detail matters, fam, because it means the foundation of this entire case started when Slugga Tee was still a teenager, not a grown man, not some hardened adult criminal mastermind from day one. He was a kid from the north side who'd already been documented online for months as part of the Y&R movement, a movement JSO and local reporting directly tied to a larger gang designation known as KTA. And that gang label is exactly what investigators leaned on to justify treating a 17-year-old's music videos as evidence worth building a case around in the first place. Let's be real about who else was caught up in that same sweep, because Slugga Tee wasn't an isolated case. He was one piece of a much bigger operation. JSO arrested 6 people total that day and named 3 more suspects still wanted, all tied to the same Y&R KTA umbrella, all facing some version of the same possession of a firearm charge. That's the part outside viewers miss. This wasn't one rapper getting singled out. It was a coordinated, multi-defendant operation built specifically around the idea that an entire crew's social media footprint could be treated as one connected body of evidence, with each individual video functioning as a thread investigators could pull to build separate, parallel cases against everybody who appeared in frame. So check it. Let me break down how this whole operation actually worked, because the mechanics matter. Jacksonville prosecutors had to determine whether the firearms shown in the videos were actually real. And a firearms expert at JSO acknowledged the definitive identification isn't even possible just from watching footage. So what the state did was use the videos as probable cause to get search warrants, then build the actual case off whatever physical evidence got recovered once those warrants were executed. This wasn't a situation where Jacksonville cops were arresting people for rapping. That's a misconception that spread online and still gets repeated. The videos opened the door. What got found behind that door is what built the cases that stuck. That brings us to the conviction itself. But check the timeline here, because it matters. Slugga Tee wasn't arrested and sentenced back to back. 3 full years sat between that January 2019 arrest and his eventual conviction in January 2022. And for a chunk of that stretch, Simmons was actually out on bond, some of it under house arrest, while prosecutors built their case and the matter worked its way through the Duval County court system. That's its own kind of limbo, fam. Not free, not locked up, just waiting, watching the case hang over your head while you're still trying to make music and still trying to live some version of a normal life with a felony charge attached to your name. During that pretrial window, online chatter and local content creators tracking the case floated the possibility of him facing as much as 15 years if convicted at the higher end of sentencing guidelines. A number that never became official until the verdict actually came down, but one that shows just how much uncertainty hung over him for those 3 years before anything was settled. Simmons was convicted in January 2022 of possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, the same charge his murder twins partner Mookie was convicted of just a month prior. Simmons was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Now, real talk, let's clarify something, because a lot of online content throws around the word federal loosely, and that's not accurate. This was prosecuted through the Duval County Circuit Court system, a state case, not a federal one. His partner Mookie was sentenced separately in his own hearing, with the judge telling him directly, "You are a danger to the community." After prosecutors had actually pushed for a 20-year sentence based on Mookie's prior record before the judge ultimately came down lower. The real tea that got everybody shook, though, is that the song that made the Murder Twins duo a viral phenomenon, over 4.5 million views on YouTube, actually dropped in April 2020 after both men were already locked up. The defining anthem of their partnership came out while both of them were sitting in jail awaiting trial. Built off footage, and vocals recorded before their arrest ever caught up with them. That's exactly how this entire scene operates. Momentum doesn't stop just because an artist gets locked up. The legend keeps circulating online with or without the person behind it being free to capitalize on it. Now let's talk about what those 7 years actually meant in practice. Because prison time, especially state custody in Florida, is a completely different reality than the glamorized version people sometimes imagine from rap lyrics. Serving a multi-year sentence in the Florida Department of Corrections means years removed from the digital ecosystem that built your fame in the first place. No consistent social media access, no ability to drop new content, no ability to respond to beefs, trends, or shifts in the culture in real time. For an artist whose entire identity was built on documenting things as they happen, that kind of total disconnection is uniquely brutal. Let's break down what that actually looks like day to day, fam. Because the version people picture from rap lyrics and the version that actually plays out inside FDC facilities are two completely different things. You're talking about a system that's been the subject of repeated state and federal scrutiny over the years for overcrowding, understaffing, and conditions that don't get softer just because you've got a fan base on the outside. Communication gets reduced to monitor phone calls on a clock, paid email systems that get read before they get delivered, and visitation that depends entirely on family being able to make the drive and clear whatever screening process that facility requires that week. None of that stops just because your song is sitting at 4.5 million views. If anything, that kind of visibility can complicate things further inside, since correctional staff and other incarcerated people both know exactly who you are and exactly what content put you there in the first place. There's no anonymity to fall back on, no quiet stretch of time to just serve a sentence unnoticed. In the hood, we know that reputation moves fast and fades faster when you're not there to maintain it yourself. Every week away is a week somebody else gets to define who you are without your input. Meanwhile, the scene that made Slugga Tee didn't pause and wait. Jacksonville drill kept evolving while he was gone. New artists emerged, new sounds developed, and some of his peers from that same era, like Foolio, became victims of the same violence the music documented. With Foolio killed in 2024 in Tampa, a loss that reshaped how fans talked about the culture's real-world stakes. That single event alone forced a citywide reckoning about how much of this content was entertainment versus, in hindsight, foreshadowing real tragedy. And it's a conversation Slugga Tee came home into the middle of, whether he wanted to or not. Now let's talk about the return itself, because this is where we got to separate fact from internet fiction. According to verified reporting that circulated as his release approached, Slugga Tee was not released straight into full unrestricted freedom. He was transferred into a transitional halfway house environment first, a standard step in the re-entry process for people completing lengthy custodial sentences. For y'all who don't know how this works, let me explain plain. A halfway house, sometimes called a residential re-entry center, is a supervised facility that houses people in the final stretch of their sentence, allowing limited, monitored movement back into society before full release. Residents check in and out for approved activities like work or appointments, follow strict curfews, submit to drug testing, and stay under correctional supervision the entire time. This stage matters more than fans give it credit for. It's the period where someone's behavior is most closely tracked, and any violation, even a minor one, can send a person right back to full custody before they ever actually get free. Online updates tracking this case referenced him being roughly 60 days out from completing that halfway house phase, meaning that even after he was photographed and filmed in public again, he was still operating under real, documented restrictions, not the wide-open freedom a lot of captions imply. It's worth sitting with how strange that gap actually is, fam. The gap between what fans see and what's actually happening legally. From the outside, a video of Slugga Tee back in the neighborhood looks like total freedom. From the inside, it might just be an approved outing tied to a work pass or a brief window between check-ins, still bound by curfew, still subject to drug testing, still one violation away from getting sent back. And once that halfway house phase ends completely, it doesn't necessarily mean unconditional freedom either. Depending on the specific sentencing terms, there's a real possibility of a probation period sitting on the other side of full release, meaning supervision could realistically stretch on for years past whatever date people online are treating as the day he got out. That's the part that rarely makes it into a caption, because it doesn't move the same way back to sliding does. But it's the actual legal reality shaping every move he makes in public for a long time after that first viral video drops. Now, this is exactly where the internet narrative took over and ran way ahead of the actual facts. The phrase "already back to sliding" spread across Jacksonville-focused blog pages and TikTok edits within hours of his first public sighting. For y'all who don't know what sliding means in drill culture, in street language, it typically refers to actively moving on rivals, often implying violent intent. It's one of the most loaded terms in this genre's vocabulary, carrying real weight when used seriously, and a completely different, almost celebratory weight when used as internet hype language. The real issue is that audiences online often can't or won't distinguish between those two meanings. A simple video of Slugga Tee back in his old neighborhood got captioned with sliding language, not because anybody had documented evidence of actual criminal activity, but because that's the language this entire content ecosystem runs on. Repost pages know violent-sounding captions generate more engagement than neutral ones. This ain't just about whether Slugga Tee specifically did or didn't do anything. This is about how an entire content economy has been built around turning ambiguous footage of formerly incarcerated artists into viral, fear-driven engagement, and sometimes that works in an artist's own favor. Because in this genre, perceived danger has always been part of the commercial appeal. Let that sink in for a minute, fam, because it applies way beyond just Slugga Tee. And real talk, this dynamic doesn't just shape how fans perceive him, it can shape how his actual supervision plays out too. Probation officers, halfway house staff, and even the state attorney's office aren't operating in a vacuum, fam. They see the same viral clips, the same captions, the same comment sections everybody else does. A caption claiming someone's already back to sliding might just be empty hype to a fan scrolling for entertainment. But to someone responsible for monitoring his compliance, it can read as a flag worth following up on, regardless of whether anything in the actual footage shows wrongdoing. That's the real risk sitting underneath all this internet noise. It's not just reputational, it's potentially legal. And it's exactly why so many people who've actually been through this process come home and go quiet on purpose, letting the work speak before they let the cameras back in. Let's talk truthfully about what comes next, because that's what everybody actually wants to know. Fan discussion across Jacksonville rap forums picked up almost immediately around the possibility of new Slugga Tee music, with speculation building around whether he'd revisit the Murder Twins sound that made him famous or push toward a more mature, reflective direction shaped by the years he just served. This is a pattern that plays out across rap history whenever an artist returns from a lengthy sentence. The question always becomes whether to lean into the persona that built your fame or to evolve it, knowing the industry changed dramatically while you were gone. Streaming algorithms, platform rules, even the dominant regional sounds in Jacksonville have shifted since 2019, meaning Slugga Tee isn't just rebuilding a career, he's re-entering an entirely different industry landscape than the one he left. For y'all who know the culture, this has played out before. Gucci Mane's case is probably the most studied example in modern rap. He went away, came back leaner, sharper, more disciplined, and expanded his audience rather than shrinking it, partly because he leaned into transformation as the narrative instead of pretending nothing changed. T.I. served real federal time on weapons charges of his own back in the late 2000s and rebuilt his public image around redemption and growth, eventually turning that story into a central part of his brand for over a decade. Then you got artists like Bobby Shmurda, who came home after roughly 7 years on conspiracy and weapons charges tied to his own viral rise, only to find an industry and an audience that had moved on so far that rebuilding momentum became its own separate battle. Slugga Tee's challenge sits somewhere in that same uncertain territory. He's got a built-in, loyal regional fan base that kept his name alive for 7 years through pure nostalgia and respect for the Murder Twins' legacy. But converting that loyalty into sustained relevance in a completely changed streaming landscape is a different battle entirely. There's also a business reality sitting underneath all of this that doesn't get talked about enough, fam. Coming home as a convicted felon with a documented case history changes how labels, distributors, and even show promoters approach you, regardless of how big your name still is online. Booking shows can mean navigating local law enforcement attention in a way artists without a record never have to think about. Distribution deals can come with extra scrutiny. Even something as simple as travel for a video shoot or a feature can get complicated depending on the exact terms of his probation once he's fully off paper. None of that shows up in a viral clip or a comment section, but it's the actual infrastructure an artist has to rebuild quietly, behind the scenes, while the public-facing conversation stays focused on captions and footage. Now, this is deeper than just music. Incarceration reshapes artist branding in ways that go beyond the sound itself. It adds a layer of lived authenticity that audiences in this genre specifically respond to. Because surviving real-time validates the documentation, not fiction, claim drill artists make about their content in the first place. At the same time, fans and critics alike start watching closely for any sign of change, any sign of growth, while some corners of the audience specifically want the unchanged, unfiltered version back, because that's the version they fell in love with originally. That tension between an audience wanting evolution and an audience wanting authenticity frozen in amber is exactly what fuels speculation like the back to sliding narrative the moment a formerly incarcerated artist reappears in public. At the end of the day, fam, Slugga Tee's situation isn't just about whether one video clip means something dangerous or means nothing at all. It's about something deeper. What it actually means to try to rebuild a public identity after years of total silence in an industry and a culture that moved on without you, while carrying a story that was partially written by other people while you had no ability to respond. Operation Wrap Up, the conviction, the 7-year sentence, the halfway house transition, those are the documented, verifiable facts. The back to sliding narrative, the captions, the speculation about what one piece of footage really means, that's internet interpretation, built on a foundation of genuine ambiguity that this entire genre has always lived inside of. The real question now isn't whether Slugga Tee changed in those 7 years. The real question is whether the culture around him will let him define that answer himself, through his actual music and actual choices, or whether the algorithm-driven, engagement-hungry content ecosystem that surrounds artists like him will keep writing that story before he ever gets the chance to write it on his own terms. That's the deeper underlying theme sitting underneath this entire story. For artists who survive sentences like this, 1. The hardest part often isn't actually the years behind bars. It's coming home and discovering that the narrative didn't pause while you were gone. It kept moving, kept mutating, kept getting shaped by people who were never in the room, never in the cell block, never sitting across from a judge listening to a sentence get handed down. Slugga Tee survived 7 years of state custody starting from when he was barely an adult. Now he's facing a different kind of battle. Not survival in the literal sense, but survival of his own story, in a culture that's already decided what it wants to believe before he's even had the chance to speak for himself. That's the real weight of coming home in this era, fam. It used to be that getting out meant the hardest part was over. Now getting out is just the start of a different fight. One fought in comment sections and repost pages instead of courtrooms, where the verdict gets decided by whoever posts first and whoever gets the most engagement, not by whoever's actually telling the truth. Whether Slugga Tee wins that fight depends on what he does next. The music he drops, the choices he makes in public, and whether he can outpace a narrative that, real talk, already had a 7-year head start on him before he even walked back through the door. What are your thoughts on Slugga Tee's return, and what comes next for him, fam? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments down below, and click on the video on screen right now for more stories just like this. 1.